But each one of these things comes from an egg, right? So who's laying these eggs?
Looks like some sort of secreted resin.
Yeah. But secreted from what?
Nobody touch nothing.
Welcome to the Hive, presented by Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast. I'm your host, Jaime Prater, and I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Patrick Green,
Christian Motzka,
and guest co-host,
David Gogol.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand this off to either Christian or Patrick to break the news as to what we're talking about today.
Christian, drag us all to hell. Let's go.
Let's go.
I mean, hopefully
Express elevator, let's go.
Hopefully people have read the name of the episode that they're listening to, which is we're doing a 10-year retrospective of Aliens Colonial Marines, the most beloved video game in the entire history of the Alien franchise, right? No game is as talked about and loved as ACM.
I would go one step further and say in the history of video games, I don't think there's been a more universally regarded as high quality.
I played hours of this game.
Yeah.
We're in beta already, and we're polishing the game, improving it, iterating it, and getting it ready for launch. And man, what an exciting time! I mean, to be able to work in the Aliens fiction, when there's something as important and inspirational as the Aliens franchise, so many of us have been inspired by this, and you can see things that we've all borrowed in our games.
None of that's true, right? This is the game that. I mean, where do you even begin? There were lawsuits. There were actual. Were they successful, you guys? I mean, people were saying, "You showed me this, I bought it, and that wasn't it, and I want money." Right? That's what that was.
Yeah, it was ultimately unsuccessful, but there was one major class action lawsuit filed by two gamers who felt so deceived by the E3 presentation in 2012, and then when the subsequent game shipped a year later, what it actually arrived as, which we'll talk about tonight. They felt like it constituted like a breach of trust and false advertising. And Randy Pitchford, the guy who was behind Gearbox Studios, was actually personally the subject of a class action lawsuit, which is in itself, I think, an interesting moment in video game history, because that's happened a couple of times. But for a licensed game like this from a really successful, I mean, Gearbox Studios is the studio behind Borderlands, which is like one of the biggest game franchises of the last 20 years. They had the rights to Duke Nukem. Like really big AAA, I mean, they didn't do a good job with those rights, but really big AAA things. And they were sued by gamers who had a real grudge because of false advertising and not delivering on the promises they made. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Christian.
We got to deliver our vision, and we have to commit ourselves fully towards that. Once we've completed that, that's the best opportunity for us to think about what we might do next. And that could include DLC, it could include, who knows? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Why did they sue? What were they deceived by?
Trailers, the previews.
There was in particular, there was what was presented as, I'm Randy Pitchford, I own the company, and this guy next to me is so-and-so, and he's playing the game live next to me as we talk about it. And yes, he was playing, but it wasn't an actual level from the game. There were elements of it that showed up in the final game, but what you see him doing, the atmospherics, all of it, it was fake. They were running. First of all, they said they were playing it on, I think it was a PlayStation, when actually it was being
PS3.
Run, it was being run through a PC, an actual, home computer,
the developer workstation.
Yeah.
Like the actual.
I'm gonna let Patrick explain.
No, sorry, keep going.
No, because you're the gaming guy. You tell us, but I'm right? Like they presented a false narrative of what this game was. Now, whether that was enough to justify, I want reparations over this or something, but it was fake. It wasn't real.
And just to jump in for a second on that, there is a long history of developers doing this, especially at a conference like E3, right? This is not the first time that's happened. It's actually par for the course. You present a tech demo that shows aspects of the game, And you usually have very clear language on that demo that says something to the effect of, this is pre-alpha footage.
Right.
This might not be what you actually get when this game comes out. There was none of that, but there was actually the opposite of that for this particular tech demonstration that they did. And Randy Pitchford, who's a really good pitch man, was consistently driving home the point, like Christian said, that this is the actual game. Like you can't even believe we're playing this on current gen hardware. It's going to look just like this when the game comes out. Meanwhile, Gearbox Studios was barely even touching this game at the time. It was being worked on by like 7 different studios, none of whom were communicating with each other. So Gearbox didn't even know what the game looked like by that point. But Randy Pitchford very publicly sold it. And then in interview after interview, when he was being asked about things like the particle effects and the anti-aliasing and how like sophisticated the light design was, he'd be like, oh yeah, that's the production level of the game that's coming out. We worked with Sid Mead. We put all this thought into the level design. It's going to blow your mind with what, and also, Fox was saying, oh, this is a new canon entry in the series. Everybody was doubling down on this idea. And then what shipped was so different from that.
Did Fox ever say it? Pitchford repeatedly said, this is canon. Everything we're creating is now part of the lore. I don't know if Fox ever actually, they don't come out and say those sorts of things, but he was making it. I mean, he's a pitchman. He hypes his company to try to bring in the money, which they then spent on a different game.
I'm going to look it up while we keep going. I want to
I have another question. Another question then. So people are coming out and saying that this game is canon. So which is retconning Alien 3. I guess sort of.
Fox came out and debunked that. They said, no, it's not.
Really?
They took it away.
What? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. The game is so disgraced by most of the fan base that Fox said, you know what? Let's take our footprint, our claw print away from this disaster of a release. They just said, no, it's not. It's not. Yeah.
I have another question, but it's about something that goes on in the game. But
jump right in.
Okay. So, whose body was in the cryo tube on Fury 161? I didn't get to that point.
Turk. Who's Turk? Guy that you don't know about until the downloadable content comes out. Did you get to that at all, Jamie? To the DLC?
I was watching. Yes, I was watching some of that, but I didn't get through all of it.
Somebody else take that. I'm fact checking.
It's a retcon that needs a retcon because it isn't enough to shove a body into the thing. You got to have the bandages. Like it just. Can we just start with, you go on board the Sulaco and there's Bishop's legs, right? And they made a big deal. Isn't it great? There's Bishop's legs. The legs we saw fly out in the movie. They didn't watch the movie. And this keeps happening. They're like, oh, we were so specific. The facehugger is right where it was when they shoot it in the med lab. And it isn't. And it's like, why would you say these things? And the shapes of the doorways, like it blows my mind when you're given visual references, like recreate this thing. And they're like, nah,
nowhere close.
Here's just a sci-fi hallway, sci-fi doorway.
What made it worse was all the excitement. Like all us gamers and Alien fans couldn't wait. Like I pre-ordered the game. I took a day off. Like I took a pay day off from work. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get this. I paid extra money for the collector's edition. Mind you, the collector's edition is the best part of this game. You get this cool statue of a Marine fighting an alien in a power loader. I booted it up and I'm like, all right, let's do this. Had a beer ready, got some snacks, some popcorn. I'm like, all right, let's recreate Aliens. Let's get this Alien sequel. And you get an hour or two in, and everything just went just downhill. I'm like, this isn't what I was shown at E3 or in the magazine. This isn't what was advertised. You got catfished by a video game company. I'm like, what is this? It was
Dave. What was the first thing you hear? You put that disc in, it boots up, and what do you hear? Alien Resurrection.
Yep.
You use the Alien Resurrection score. And I thought, oh no.
Yeah,
not a good start.
God.
And then the aliens, the Xenos are getting stuck in the wall, or they're just sitting there. I'm sitting there with my pulse rifle smart gun, just lazily going X. I'm like, I didn't think killing aliens could be boring. I was wrong. It was just.
Jamie, did you see the cutscene early on where they're trying to do chest compressions on this Marine because they, trying to bring him back, but he's still got his armor on. So they're just
I didn't get to that.
Oh, come on. It may have gone by really quickly. I think that he chest bursts soon after, but like, guys, on some level, you have to put some thought into this thing. And across the board, no thought was put into this except, hey, that'd be cool. All right, we'll send that to this company and they'll work on it. You know what else would be cool? Great. We'll send it to a different company. And when it all came together, it's like,
And
but
the funny part too is the recreation of Hadley's Hope actually wasn't too bad. And like there was a cool part like with I think it was the Queen broke out, which was kind of fun. But it's like, where was this monicum of effort for the rest of the game? Like it was like it had a couple parts which were all right, this is what they were trying to do, but it just didn't. It was that little hint, little smudge of bringing the universe onto your home TV. It just failed. It was just, I mean, it just came nowhere close to what was promised. And it was.
What was the? So then, what was this when fandom was like, "Oh my God, what is this garbage?" What was this? The studio, not Fox, but like the studio who made the game. What were they saying when people were like, "This is not the game you sold"?
Oh, Randy Pitchford for months was out there defending this game, but talking about, well, this is the process. We put it out there as quick as we can, and then we're going to take your feedback. We're going to make improvements, and just kept. But yeah, so Dave Gogol for listeners is holding up the statue that came
best
with
part
the
of the game
collector's
right
edition.
now.
Yeah, I fucking love that statue.
I have two of them. I took one of them apart just for fun. So yeah, it's a Marine and a power loader fighting an alien, which accounts for maybe 2 minutes of the actual game. You get like one chance to do that. But now I want Patrick to walk us back, because the idea of Aliens, Colonial Marines, the video game, goes way back and was cursed for many years before Gearbox really even touched it, right?
Yeah, and so let's do that, and let's also let me get my fact-checking hat on. 20th Century Fox did actually publicly state that the plot was going to be canon, so they did say that before the game came out. But subsequently, like Gogol was saying, it has distanced itself, and that's why almost nothing from the game has shown up in any other expanded universe materials whatsoever. There are some things that you can kind of trace to the game, and I'm sure we'll get to that kind of towards the end, because it'd be fun to talk about the legacy of this piece of shit too, I think, at the end. But before we get to that, let's talk about kind of like where it came from, because that was a really interesting story, I think. And then I really want to go back to what Dave was just talking about, which is what it was like to play it for the first time, because it was really an acid trip of an experience as somebody who was that excited about it. But let's go back for a moment.
So where the hell are they, Bright?
Don't know. Could take us days to sift through this much data. And that just tells us who made it back to the cryotubes. Better off doing it the old-fashioned way, like we found the synthetic on the ship.
You found the synthetic?
We found half the synthetic, sir.
Jesus, Mary, we had 2 civvies on that boat.
Yes, sir. One, Ellen Ripley and Carter J. Burke. Ripley has the last 2 entries, both entering and exiting a cryotube. Did I mention the half we found was his legs?
Well, somebody blew the atmospheric processor and Hadley's Hope private.
Sir, due respect, we ain't getting anything else out of this computer.
This basically dates back to Gearbox Studios, who, again, is a AAA level developer who has been behind some really, really huge hits. Although at the time they started work on this in 2007, they hadn't really had a big breakout yet. That was going to come in 2009. And that actually ends up being part of the narrative of why this game's so fucked up. And I'll get to that in a second. But Gearbox Studios was thinking, we really need to get into licensed content. That's kind of the next step that we need to go to. So they approached 20th Century Fox, in part because Randy Pitchford, I believe it was Randy Pitchford, had a meeting of some kind with Ridley Scott. So Ridley is somewhat at the very beginning of this whole story. And Randy was like, maybe this is the right fit. The Alien franchise was kind of in a weird spot after the AVP films. It was kind of sitting there floating around. There was isolation and development. Not in 2007, but as this game was being created. So it felt like a good opportunity for Gearbox to get into licensed game. Something interesting with Gearbox Studios is that they have a long history of really getting stuck in development hell on titles they're involved with. The most notorious of these examples is actually not Aliens Colonial Marines. It's the Duke Nukem 3D or whatever that game was that came out a few years ago, which was a travesty, but had been rumored to be in development for like literal decades. Like that's a game that I had been hearing about since, I was like a middle schooler or something. So like Gearbox Studios clearly has some issues with pipeline delivery and ways of working, right? So anyway, so they started getting their ideas together to do this game, and they were talking to Sega, who at that point owned the rights to Alien. And that's why when you see Isolation boot up, you see the Sega logo. Like Sega owned the video game rights for quite some time before it reverted back. And Sega was like, present us your ideas. And they brought that to Fox, and Fox was like, yeah, sure thing. So they came up with a couple of pitches for games. And one of them was for a first-person shooter. So you have to put yourself back in the shoes of like early aughts video game design. The game that everybody was talking about was Call of Duty. The Call of Duty franchise was so dominant, and it continues to this day to be an absolute juggernaut. But like this idea of very military first-person shooters was just all over the place. Multiplayer, co-op, FPS. So like that was the one that got greenlit for this. And it seemed like it had everything that it needed for success. You have a great developer who's backed by the studio, who's backed by the publisher, who, they've all basically said, go with this FPS design. It'll sell like hotcakes. And it really seemed like it would. A few years go by and they're, getting things rolling on this game. They come up with this other game called Borderlands, which comes out, I think, in 2009. And Borderlands was an instant iconic game. Like that was a game it broke the mold in terms of that era of console gaming. It was a huge hit.
It was a runaway hit. It was just a smash right from the jump.
Oh yeah, and you see the influence all over things, and there was sequels to it, and actually Gearbox just announced like a matter of weeks ago a whole number of more sequels. It's a huge franchise. So that was so successful that whoever they made Borderlands for, I'm assuming that was also Sony, I think, was behind that. I don't know. You can fact check that if you want. Anyway, they ordered Borderlands 2 right away. So Gearbox was like, clearly we are on to like what our legacy product will be. Let's focus on Borderlands 2 and we can outsource this Aliens game to different studios, which you would think in a well-run system would make sense. People do that all the time. If you look at the credits of video games, you see 3 or 4 developers listed a lot of the time, right? The issue here is that Gearbox basically abdicated this title early on. And at a point where the story wasn't finalized, the story of this game wasn't actually finally written until shortly before it was published. They were still making narrative changes to the game up until basically 3 weeks before showtime, which is no surprise if you played the fucking thing. Anyway, so they outsourced all this stuff. They outsourced the coding of a lot of really core game mechanics. And what happened was when the code came back, it was so buggy and such a mess. And none of the elements were talking to each other. The assets weren't loading properly. It wasn't running well on the current gen systems. So Gearbox, but after the E3 conference, basically was like panicking. And they, for 9 months, did a crunch to try to make the game work. And that 9 months basically went from a few months after the E3 conference, where they had already developed an impossible game to people because the hardware was not in a place where it could have possibly come out like that. And then they had 9 months to birth this fucking nightmare baby that ended up coming out with things that are so rudimentarily wrong that it would open with, for example, the Alien Resurrection soundtrack. And as Dave was mentioning, it would have errors in the code that would make it impossible for the actual enemies you're fighting to know where they exist in space. And that code, that error in the code, it was one letter in one line of code that existed until a fucking, game developer who was just playing and looking at the source code found it. It was one letter was wrong. And that one letter had made the game essentially unplayable. Anybody who's played it, especially when it first came out, knows that experience where it starts off kind of promising. It starts off promising enough that you're like, okay, I think I'm going to like this game, right? You get this distress signal. You're sent to go investigate. You go onto the Sulaco. You're in the hangar. It feels real. You see like the viscera of Bishop. You're like, oh my God, this could be a really immersive game. And then you kind of like look around a little more and you notice how off the dimensions of the hangar bay are. And you notice how strange some of the liveries look. And you're like, okay, this is weird. Maybe it's like a stylistic choice. We'll kind of stick with it. And then you end up, the first encounter that you have with a creature, almost across the board, you wonder why the fuck it's acting the way that it's acting. And it's acting the way it's acting because its artificial intelligence wasn't properly coded and it couldn't function properly. And so then you have to get through this whole game that, after that initial Sulaco encounter basically goes downhill narratively. and you have to do it in the context of a broken gaming system. So it's an incredibly unrewarding experience. And then you go through fucking 4 releases of downloadable content that are all terrible, and that end with this one that just gives you some of the biggest canonical stinkers I can think of, and it's still broken. So it's part of the issue with the game. But how did I do? Did I miss anything?
No, that was pretty good. Captivating. I was captivated the whole time. It was good.
That's what I aim for, Dave. I appreciate that.
That was good.
Funny things happened. Like they're saying, "Oh, we use the actual blueprints from the set of Aliens to recreate these sets." So what that means is they only built half the hangar bay because the other half was augmented with a model. So there's only it's this little square room with one drop ship. You're like, that doesn't feel right. And you go into where the cryotubes are, and they only put the number of cryotubes that were physically built, and they forget that there's supposed to be a mirror that then doubles them. So like someone was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get it exactly right. But then they didn't watch the movie. and I keep going back to that. So many things, either they didn't rewatch the movie, or for expediency's sake, like, okay, we're going to ignore this thing. When you first go on the Sulaco, you're like, all right, this is feeling pretty cool. I'm seeing some because Sid Mead was involved. They got Sid Mead to do a little bit of set design for them. So I'm excited about what we're going to see. And then I pass a window. A window? There's no windows on the Sulaco. The whole exterior of the ship is all hull plating. And the further you go and the more staircases and gantries and ladders and all these things, it's impossibly big. This is just it's a complete maze of reactor rooms and long corridors and all these things that make it's a TARDIS. It makes no sense for the actual shape of the ship. And then when you get down to the planet, there's Hadley's Hope. A few broken windows, a little bit of damage here and there, but it's certainly not what Bishop described, saying that there'd be a nuclear explosion the size of Nebraska. He's like, yeah, it got shaken up a little bit. And there are 1 million aliens on a planet that had 158 colonists, right? There's Randy Pitchford. Oh, well, the planet is porous, and so there are multiple queens further down in the planet, was his answer for this. Like, where are they coming from? Who are the hosts for these things? And you have 1 million of these completely random Weyland-Yutani mercenaries who all wear a balaclava and a baseball cap, which is a really good look. Anyway,
God, I forgot about all this stuff.
And you have to slog through killing all of these Wei-Yu. They're the ones that coined the term Wei-Yu for Weyland-Yutani. You have to kill about 1,000 of these guys before you get back to killing aliens again. And there's no reward to it. It's because it doesn't make sense for them to be there. Why is there a troll in your dungeon in Dungeons and Dragons? He's just standing there waiting for you to open that door and kill him. And that's exactly what these guys are doing.
But you know why they're there, right?
Why are they
there? That was an instruction from Sega to make it more like Call of Duty. So they said need more human enemies.
Oh my God, really?
So they literally just copy pasted human enemies into random encounters, and that's why they all wear the same fucking balaclava. Like it's just a couple of character models that are copy pasted that are just, and that's why there's no reward to it.
Jeez, I forgot. My subconscious, I guess, blacked it out how inaccurate all the game was. I was, Jesus, I mean, just not good. And what's funny is I remember even seeing I think it was the trailers or the art, like this cool thing with the bull or the rhino alien. It looked like it'd be this cool encounter. And then you get to it in the game and it was just, well, at least Fireteam Elite did it right. But it was just so dull and boring. Like they had a couple cool ideas for these Xeno offshoots, but it was just wasted in this terribly put together diarrhea of a game.
Because they don't know where they are. So like when you have all these exploding aliens that seem cool, right? And then they just come out in a group of 3 that walk in the exact same animation, go into a T-pose, and then blow up in the middle of a room. Like, what the fuck? You ship the game with that?
Yeah.
Speaking of poorly put together games,
Cyberpunk.
Well, that they Cyberpunk is amazing now, but Cyberpunk was released like shit, and now it's you don't think you could shine shit. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of my favorite games now. I can't wait for the DLC. It's awesome. I mean, really, really good now. But sports games used to be a huge thing, and there was EA did NBA Live and NBA did 2K. It was this huge war. And 2K took this huge lead. NBA, EA was trying to come back, and they released this full game, this demo, and there was this infamous thing. You could Google NBA Live T. This fucking guy in the middle of the court, in the middle of the game, just doing this with his hands up in a completely finished game. It's like, what are you doing? You guys are getting paid all this money. Test your game. And then to see it in an Alien game, I'm like, oh my God, guys, come on.
And again, anytime you see a T-pose in a game like that, it's the exact same error that we're talking about, where somebody coded the character wrong, because the T-pose is what they designed the character in when they're drawing it. So so what it's saying is there's no instructions for the character for where it should be in space and what it should be doing.
God.
So it's just a character model. That's so stupid.
Terrible.
Okay, so my question is about the intentions of the game. I don't know if you guys know this, if there's an answer to this question. Because Fox was signing off on this, was this a game to launch, like, to retcon Alien 3 so that they could restart the series again? Like, I'm curious why they decided to go with Hicks and retconning everything and not just an original character that, okay, so, and everyone could probably stomach that Hadley's Hope or LV-426 wasn't as blown up as it was. Okay, we can probably get past that for a good game. Oh, but why not send in new characters there? Why did they have to bring Hicks and Bishop back? What was the point of that?
Well, it's a resurrection. I mean, it really is. I mean, what I saw tonight, that's cool. I mean, it's almost in 3D.
Randy Pitchford said he felt that Alien 3 was more of a sequel to Alien, and so he wanted to make a game that felt more like a sequel to Aliens. And if that was his intention, I think that it doesn't exactly succeed, but it 100% is clearly aiming for that. We want, how many times does a character say, "Oorah to ashes," which is something that no Marine in the actual film says, but they got it in their heads that that's what they should say over and over again. Anyway, it's that kind of, testosterone and pulse rifles. And once you're high on that vibe, let's bring Hicks back. We can get Michael Biehn. He's agreed to do it. He's signed off. They approached Sigourney Weaver, and Sigourney Weaver said, "Oh no, I don't want anything to do with that," which she had done for other things as well. But I think that they were a little bit mad or high on that power of, we're getting to do whatever we want, so why don't we bring Hicks back? It'll make the fans super happy, because clearly they didn't care for Alien 3. They were of the camp that was like, what if we could redo it? And I said earlier in our chat, I wish they had brought Hudson back. Bill Paxton was alive at the time. He was clearly enthusiastic. There's a great photo of him in their life-size power loader fighting the alien, just like the statue that Dave Gogol has. And that character it's so much less problematic to bring Hudson back because of the way that his death plays out than to do the Hicks thing. But I think they clearly wanted to undercut Alien 3 as a way of, like I said, making this the sequel to Aliens that they thought Aliens fans wanted. So that's my answer. I don't believe they were setting up a larger narrative. I think they may have thought they were opening the door for a larger narrative, because Blomkamp came right after this, right?
Yeah, because I asked this question because if Fox is signing off on a retcon initially, that means their gears are turning for something else. They're trying to, like, well, how do we get back to this fan base? How do we get back to this moment in this series that everyone loved? And then of course they pulled back on that. But yeah, it's one of my lingering, and I don't think I got to a point when I was watching the material that I was watching, like, are Ripley and Newt alive still? Like, what's okay? So they are dead. Okay,
they're still dead.
Hicks just made it out for whatever reason,
for paycheck reasons.
So I came into fandom through Colonial Marine costuming groups, right? Especially the Aliens Legacy group, and this game was for us. This was Colonial Marines, and at a time where we hadn't really gotten that. The Alien versus Predator games are always set a little further in the future, a little more advanced, and Gearbox reached out to us. So I'm in the game. I'm an NPC on LV-426. At a certain point, you run into some other Marines, and one of them has Motska written right above his head, and he has not my face, but he has the graffiti that's right on the suit of armor behind me. They reached out to a whole bunch of us and said, "Hey, we really like what you're doing. Can we put you in the game?" In fact, there are 3 Marines that you run into, a smart gunner and 2 others, that they actually scanned the fans' faces and used their likeness and their names, and they flew them all over the place to support this game. They were in costume, you know, at conventions and expos and all kinds of things. And so that group of fans went hard for this game until the day it released. It was really hard to be like, wow, this thing that we have been so excited for and pushing for just completely undercut what it was supposed to be. However, I still have a soft spot in my heart for this game because of the enthusiasm. Jamie, you talk about how much you love the lead up to a movie's release. I loved the lead up to the release of this game. I loved the camaraderie. I loved seeing people, you know, all over the world, people I knew that were costumers going to the game stores on release day in full kit to be there to support this game being released. I don't know. That sticks with me. And the other thing I just will say, since I'm talking about nostalgia, my oldest son, again, I'm bad at video games. I am bad. So I had children to raise them to play the video games for me. So I played so much Aliens Colonial Marines with my oldest son when he was pretty young, probably too young to be playing it. And I specifically remember this one place in Hadley's Hope. He got ahead of me and he welded the door shut as I think it's called the Raven, this gigantic alien was bearing down on me. And, you know, it was a fantastic bonding moment of like, you son of a bitch. You just completely screwed me over for shits and giggles. And so my constant complaint with video games is the NPC saying the same lines over and over again. But we had fun with it because the big guy with the smart gun keeps saying something about these fucking aliens. And, you know, he was at a young enough age that we weren't really showing him things that had swear words, but we bonded over that too. So
what is NPC again?
Non-player character.
Okay.
And this game has the worst non-player characters because they're coded so poorly. They don't provide cover. You know,
they often just turn in circles for some reason.
Yeah. It's like that meme that you keep sharing, that GIF, Patrick, of the digital
isolation
film.
digital series. Yeah. It's like they just don't know where they are. But I think just to go back to, I think this will be fun to talk about for a moment too, because Dave and I had a pretty similar story going off of what he was saying before. I took the day off work for this. This was something that I was looking forward to for many years.
Yes, because they've been trying to capture that feel of being a Marine so many times, and it just goes to show you how, well, Aliens, it seems like the simple movie, you try to replicate it, and it's just not that easy. I'm like, all right, this game's gonna fucking do it. Yeah.
But the AVP games had shown us glimpses of that, right? Because there have been good AVP games. And we had one just 2 years before this came out that I still think is fantastic.
I love the AVP 2010. I love that game.
A great game.
Love that game.
So for me, I was like, oh, great. So now we're going to build on the success of that. And we're going to do just Colonial Marines. They got Sid Mead involved. This is Gearbox. Like, they're awesome. Like, this is going to be such
I'm like, Gearbox is doing it. Let's fucking go.
Yeah. So I took the day off and everything. And I remember Micah was pregnant with Jude at the time. This is how long ago this was now. It's been 10 years. It's crazy. It's about to be 10 in 5-6 days. And it came out in February. I remember that year. And it was this whole like event, and like my friends all bought it, and we all like played it at the same. Like I remember my buddy Drew, who's been on some of our shows in the past, like, you know, he took the day off too, and we were like talking about it. We're like, "Are you ready to boot it up?" And it was like, and I just remember the Sulaco being small. I remember the hangar bay being small, and being like, "What?" Like it was so jarring, and I was trying really hard to like get past how off the geometry was. Which is funny. I didn't know about the blueprint thing, Christian. I was like laughing so hard I almost went off camera during that, because that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like they just made the half of the room that wasn't mirrored by the other half. And it's like from that point forward, it was just this exercise in like, what the fuck happened to this game? And I did not enjoy it very much, other than the fact, and the Christian also alluded to this, that it has cooperative multiplayer in it. And that's something that still to this day, like we always ask for it and we never get it in any games. We all thought Fireteam Elite was going to have that, and then it didn't. You know, I was really hoping Dark Descent would have a way to do that, and that has not had any way to do multiplayer at all. But this game has cooperative multiplayer, so it's a game you can play with your kids if you hate them. You know, if you want to show them a bad time, right? And I played it with our kids, and they laugh about it because it's still just such a mess, and it just hasn't aged well. That's the other thing too. So Christian, you mentioned in our chat thread, Alien Isolation, of course, came out a matter of months after this game, right? It came out probably 14 months or so later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alien Isolation, I just beat it again this weekend. Like, that is a game, as we've talked about many times, just have never stopped playing. It's still, there were still moments in this last playthrough where, like, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, how the fuck is this even a video game? It's so beautiful. Like, it's so real.
Gorgeous. Everything is meticulous.
Everything. And like, you just turn 360 degrees. So much care, right? Yeah.
Love. And you want to screenshot everything and
yeah.
Isolation has been an influence on novels, video games, and now movies.
Yeah.
We definitively, the one image we have from Romulus, fucking there's the save station right on the wall.
Yeah.
Colonial Marines has been an influence on how to make that is the lowest we can sink. Oh, that's good to know. Let's go up. Let's go up. One last thing about Colonial Marines, though, that we can't forget. You're talking about cooperative. They sunk more time into making the online cooperative aspect of this, right? Remember this? You and your friends can play. You can play as aliens. You can do all this stuff. And then almost immediately they stopped supporting it. So within 6 months, no one was playing the online version of the game. That you weren't in, any of those levels. It was all like player versus player. You could get different skins. You could do all this crazy modification stuff. And then they just stopped supporting it. So, because if that had been successful, that absolutely would have saved the game, I think. I never played it, but like that, people being able to go and do that could have gone for years, but they didn't support it.
And I'm not a big online gamer. I mean, I put hours into Fireteam Elite. It's a shame, like you said, Patrick, there was no couch co-op for it.
I remember we talked about that, Dave. Remember we were like, we're going to like boot this up and play together, and it couldn't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, or at least now it's they made a multi-platform. Like, I haven't played it in months, but I played, like, it got to the point where I was playing with someone almost once a week. I was playing my friends on Xbox. I mean, I have it on every fucking system. And I'm like, all right. And like you said, the couple months I played Colonial Marines Online, I'm like, this is fun. And then they said, you know what? Never mind.
Team Elite and Dark Descent are the descendants of Aliens Colonial Marines, and they take two different paths, but they both show that influence because certain creatures or certain weapons actually show up in those later games.
Yeah,
as this is a good thing from that. So let's keep it. But Jamie, you had a question.
Yeah. So my next question would be: the game is rolled out. People are like, "What were you guys?" Going on to like social media or like, for instance, the AVP forums, looking to see what people were saying. What was that like?
Scorched earth is what it was like. I gotta correct. Dave and I have played. We played Fireteam Elite together. I was talking about Dark Descent. You're right. I get these. Yeah,
I knew what you meant. It's okay.
But that was fun, right? No,
fun. When I'm always down to play. By the way.
Yeah, I'll hit you up tonight. We'll play this game more. I think, but not. Well, we're not gonna play Colonial Marines like that. So when the game came out, internet fandom was in a very different place. We were transitioning into the post, forum era, into like the early kind of like Facebook groups time. It was right around, obviously, the time Prometheus came out too. So we all were at a front row seat to that shit show not of a movie, but maybe of a movie, but of a release cycle where it was like people for the first time were able to come together and bitch at each other about something in the way that we do about everything now. And Colonial Marines was like a really, for me, early glimpse into how toxic that would get, but also a really nice, I think, and I'll hand this over in a second because I'm already going off topic, but I think had Isolation not come out, I feel like we would feel differently about Colonial Marines. Not like it was good. I think that tomb was sealed when that piece of shit came out. What I mean, though, is that like there's not a lot of active animosity towards it now, in my experience. Like, we kind of laugh about it a lot. Right?
Yeah, it's just
when the game came out. When it came out, I wasn't laughing about this at all. I was mad. Like, I was really mad about this game when it came out.
Yeah.
But then Isolation came out, and I was like, oh, that's literally the best game I've ever played in my life, and it's an Alien game. Like, and so I just kind of moved on from it really quickly. And I think fandom did also. And I think Colonial Marines, partly because of what Christian mentioned, in that the PvP was unsupported, and like they didn't update it, they didn't do any lobby curating, it just sort of died off. I think the game just kind of like, I mean, I would bet at any given point in time, there's two people on planet Earth playing Colonial Marines, if that.
Probably.
Like, that's probably like the most people at once that are playing this game. Whereas a game like Isolation is being played probably by literally hundreds, if not thousands of people at any given time, you know? So it's an interesting, it's weird. It kind of sits as this little like anchor point where fandom was just kind of moving towards the direction that you're talking about. And I can say, as somebody who was active in forums, especially at that point, that it was unanimously angry. It was a very, very angry place to be.
Because that's what I remember, even though I mean, obviously, as everyone knows, I'm not a gamer and I wasn't following along with any of this stuff, but I do remember years and years ago, I don't know what forum I was on. It might have even been the AVP forums, people writing, and they were just so angry about it. Like, and I remember thinking, why are they so angry about this game? And I just remember reading over like how people felt betrayed by it. Like, and it was a little shocking to me, but again, I wasn't, so I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I just thought that was interesting to be that angry at a game. But as you guys have said before, there was a lawsuit. They sued the creators because they felt so duped by the game. But how did that turn out? Do you guys know?
It didn't go through or they weren't successful. Patrick brought up a really important point. This is also a year after Prometheus, which was incredibly divisive. And there's a point in the game where you go into the derelict, right? And you see the space jockey. And if you shoot the space jockey's head with your pulse rifle, an engineer style hologram appears.
Yeah, showing, it fucking glows. Yeah.
Yep. Showing, the horseshoe shaped derelict ship and the flying saucer ship from the very beginning of Prometheus. And the flying saucer shoots the derelict down and it crashes on the planet. And we're all like, what the fuck? Because I'm sorry, Dave Gogol, I know that you love this movie, but Aliens fans, Colonial Marine fans, were not excited for Prometheus. They didn't like the direction that things were headed in, partially because of the technology. It wasn't about the story as much as it was just, this film is an anachronism. We like the used future, low-tech style. And so, and there was already this creep. There was a sense of, is Prometheus going to touch every fucking thing that I love about this franchise? Because and I'm still a little angry about that, because there was a sense of, can we please have a separation? You can have your Prometheus stuff, but why does that have to inform everything new that comes out? Because right around then was when we were getting that ridiculous, I love and hate this novel, the one where Ripley wakes up halfway through her trip.
Oh God, yeah.
Has an adventure.
The River of Pain.
Not Sea of Sorrows, not
Into the Shadows. Out of the Shadows.
Into the Shadows.
Into the Shadows.
Right. Yeah, Tim Levin, right? Yeah.
It is half a good novel, and then there's this.
Yep.
Why Ripley? Why are we doing this? And then it gets a little bit of Prometheus stuff mixed in as well. But anyway, so I've just shot the space jockey's head with my pulse rifle because I was told to by someone. I did not think to do that on my own, and I'm given this weird little, I don't know, little slice of Prometheus to explain why the space jockey was there, and just shaking my head at it. It was a time when we were all really struggling because we couldn't agree on what we wanted and we weren't liking what we were getting. And for me personally, it bled over into Alien Isolation. And I've said this before, but I'm just going to really quick. I was so fucking skeptical of Alien Isolation that when they showed the images of, look, you can play as the Nostromo crew, and they'd gotten the uniforms wrong. And I was like, how do you get the uniforms wrong? You're literally looking at a photograph. Why, if you're looking at a photograph, are you adding patches and moving things around? It blew my mind, and it made me so angry. I wrote the game off. I didn't play Isolation when it first came out because I was so angry. But it was based on the anger over Aliens, Colonial Marines being such a would you call it a catfish earlier, Dave?
Yeah, I call it catfish. Yeah, we got catfish.
Dude, that's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
So, all is forgiven, Isolation, I swear.
Yeah, but I wasn't even active in the forums then, so I can't even. I was even nowhere close to an online alien community. So I just read stuff. I think in magazines, maybe a couple of my friends, but I was completely oblivious to all of this. This is all new to me. But to not to digress, but it's what we do. But with the Prometheus stuff, I'm with you because obviously I love the movie, but in one of really the 800 ideas he had for it, I love the idea of Prometheus doing its own little, what do you call it, a side quill or whatever they called it. Do your own little Prometheus storyline, and then do everything else. Keep them separate. It works because Alien Universe is huge, despite what it doesn't feel like it always seems to get the same fucking stories. But keep them separate. There's no reason you can't do it instead of doing this forced prequel shit. But I think they kept separate. I think storyline wise, it wouldn't be as divisive, and you'd have a lot more tools to use, in my opinion, at least. But I'm definitely with you there. But yeah, Fire Team just also kind of helped heal the pain of Colonial Marines as well. But
I'm kind of sad I'm not a gamer.
Yeah,
like I wish I could get into it because it sounds so much fun. Like I want to play, but I mean that means I have to buy a whole like system and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, I bought an Xbox. I bought my Xbox to play Aliens Colonial Marines. That's because I'm not a gamer. It's like, oh my God, I have to have this so that I can play the game. So I'm not, Fireteam Elite is not the game for me, but I 100% respect that it is the game for a lot of people. And vice versa, Dark Descent is the game for me. Dark Descent finally captures the missing ingredients from Aliens that the previous attempts just didn't quite get. But I kind of think that you need the two different approaches to get at what made Colonial Marines and Aliens good. And
right.
And honestly, that AVP 2010 also does a pretty good job with the Colonial Marines.
That's the beauty of the alien shit is there's different ways you could go about. Because I mean, for me, Chris, it's the opposite. I tried Dark Descent. It's really cool, but I'm like, this is not for me. It's a good game. I'll probably eventually go back to it, but it's just not for me. But you have the real-time strategy where you could do your resources, build up your guys, and then you have the action of Fireteam Elite. It's so diverse, and what you could do with it, it's cool.
Even though those are two games that on the outside seem like they should be really similar, right? Like they're both marine exploration games that are squatty and you're fighting with other people and attacking waves of aliens, but in execution they're completely different. And I agree with both of what you're saying, which is that like it's a huge tent, right? One of the great gifts that we have by having the two seminal movies be so different from one another is that we have like two easy paths to follow, right? You can have the isolation enclosed horror, or you can have the Colonial Marines and like watch war games happen with aliens, which is really exciting too. And I think I want to circle back for one moment, kind of as we come closer to the end here, about the legacy of Colonial Marines and what it taught me personally, because I think that it came out at an instructive point in my fan experience. But there was another point in there that I wanted to talk about that it's going to come to me in the middle of this and I'm going to derail myself to talk about it. So just that's a heads up. You don't have to edit that out. It's okay. It's a spoiler warning. There's going to be a jump scare. So Colonial Marines came out, of course, like on the heels of Prometheus, when I felt very disconnected from the franchise because I did not and still unfortunately don't like Prometheus that much, although I like things that are within it. I've never been like a big Prometheus guy. I also, this game, it was first announced when I was in college still, and then it was released when I was about to get married. Like this is a long time ago at this point. And so my attention was kind of elsewhere. I was still participating in forums. I was still like an Alien, obviously fan. I had my shit all over the place, but like, I wasn't like super engaged at this point in time. And, a lot of that was because the AVP movies I had felt so just like this was just not what I was looking for. It didn't feel like it really spoke to the fan in me that loved the comics so much and things. And then you had Prometheus came out, which I just did not know what to do with, and I really wanted to like, and I just didn't. So when Colonial Marines was announced, I was kind of like, this could be the antidote a little bit. Like this could be the corrective that could kind of get us back on track here because I want Colonial Marines too. Like, that's awesome. Although I'm quote unquote an alien person, like I fucking love aliens and I would love to just have that experience and to feel more connected with my inner fan again. So that's when I got like my shell casings from the pulse rifle out and put them on the shelf again. And that's when I got all my like aliens memorabilia out and my Japanese poster that's hanging up, like I got back in kind of aliens mode for the release of this game. And when it came out, it was so bad. I had a little bit of a wake up call about what my priorities are as a fan. And I think it set me up for the contentious relationship that I had with the Blomkamp stuff in a very direct way. And later for how much I've defended Covenant. And this might be kind of loading a lot into this idea, but I think when I saw the Blomkamp promotional art come out, I started getting this feeling of like, we are falling into the same trap. I have to say, having done about 12 hours of Blomkamp episodes now with all of you, like this, I feel slightly differently about it. But at the time, I was really fixated on like, oh, there's a dropship, there's a hangar bay, there's pulse rifles, there's all these trappings of the second film that felt to me like a dog whistle a bit for fan service. And I was kind of like, oh fuck, like I feel like we're gonna get Colonial Marines the movie. Knowing more about the script now, I think it would have been stranger than that, but I think in terms of quality, kind of similar to it. So like, who knows what that would have been like. But I think I received all the Blomkamp stuff in the vein of like, I don't want to go through Colonial Marines again. Like, I don't want to get more of this shit. I don't want to just be, dumbed down to. And then when Covenant came out, I think part of why I loved and still love it, even though I see so many incredibly flaws with it, I think is because it felt to me like a much truer expression of the things in Alien that mean a lot to me personally. And it felt like it was, although it had fan service in it, and we've talked ad nauseum about that, the parts in it that I loved are not. Like the parts in it that I love in Covenant are very new and very different. And those are the things that speak to me. And I think it informs a lot of what I look for in media now. Part of why I think Fireteam Elite and Dark Descent work so well for me as a fan is because in addition to just being really fun games to play, like they both try new things out with, the canon, and they do it in a way that feels respectful, but also kind of interesting and challenging. As we talked about, Dark Descent in some ways invalidates the prequels, but maybe in some ways doesn't. But it plays with respect, I think, with some of the conventions of these things. I also want to say I'm in total agreement with both Christian and Dave, and I think probably Jamie too, although he hasn't talked about it yet, that we should separate these things. Like I do not want an Andor to Rogue One to Episode 4, everything connects all together, treatment for the Alien saga. Like I don't want that. I don't want to shoot an engineer head and have a diagram of exactly what happened come out, which by the way, what a fucking fitting metaphor for this game is it? That if you shoot the engineer, the fucking space jockey, let's call it what it is. If you shoot the space jockey in its head, you can't make a better metaphor than that, right? And that's like, it's so infuriating. And I agree with that 100%. So I guess this conversation tonight has helped me to learn a little bit about maybe where I was emotionally as a fan when this came out, and then when Blomkamp happened, and then when Covenant came out, and maybe some of the reasons why I have the opinions that I have now. It's crazy because now I've been on the show for like 7 years, and I've recorded hundreds and hundreds, and if not thousands of hours of conversation about these movies, and a lot of those hours of conversation have probably been influenced somewhat by me being pissed off about Colonial Marines and not wanting to see that happen again. And I think that the game, in terms of canon and in terms of the expanded universe, has had a really short shadow and has not influenced it very much. But in terms of my personal fan experience, I think it was actually kind of a big deal, and a much bigger deal than I remember.
Can I just point out, it just occurred to me as you were talking, Prometheus is a retcon. Aliens Colonial Marines is a retcon. Alien Isolation is a retcon. Alien Out of the Shadows is a retcon. Alien River of Pain is a retcon. And Alien Sea of Sorrows is a retcon. And finally, Blomkamp, Alien 5, a fucking retcon. There was a point where every single thing we got was saying, no, you didn't get it right. Here's the true story. And it was always a letdown, except for Alien Isolation. But the whole thing of Amanda Ripley having a whole experience with aliens, that's a huge retcon. It's a huge new addition that we have to swallow. So that was this weird period where nothing was new so much as it was taking something you knew and trying to shove a new story into it. Like River of Pain. Here's a whole bunch of Colonial Marines on LV-426. Never talked about in the movie, never represented in the movie, but you want Colonial Marines, right? Here they are, right in this novel. It was hard. It was a really hard time to be a fan. It was a hard time to accept that the thing you loved was going to be kept safe, or because the Fox kept saying, here's the new thing. And they're like, I don't want that new thing. That's not a flavor I like. So
I mean, Prater and you and I talk about this ad nauseum on either chats or the old PO recordings. Is, for fuck's sake, just give us something new. You can keep the ideas from, there's plenty of little nuggets you could take from, whether it's any of the Alien movies or prequels, little hints. Just give us. Stop trying to stuff everything into the same fucking timeline.
Yeah. That's what studios do. Yeah.
I know, but I know we've discussed this more times we could count. It's just frustrating. There's so much to explore. You could do between Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, no one ever fucking does. There's so much fun to have there. Ripley's dead, so you don't have to worry about giving yourself the umbilical cord to Ripley, other than hints of, oh, I remember, Ripley, blah, 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 encountering these fucking things. And you have so much stuff to explore. All right, Ripley's dead. Okay, now what? What's up with the creatures? Not everything between Alien and Aliens, or Aliens and Alien 3. It's been done so many times.
I wish that Prometheus was a sequel to Alien 3. I wish that was where that was put.
It's funny you said that, because back when I was hardcore writing, one of my favorite things to discuss was that I thought, I'm like, the Prometheus would have worked better as a sequel.
Yep.
I think it was my favorite episodes to record and write about. I thought the way the technology was, which pissed you off, which understandably did. So as much as I love the movie, when it started, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Why is everything so shiny? What? Huh? It makes sense in the story because it's the fancy ship, but you put that as a sequel, tweak some things, and you know what? Not too bad. I can fuck with this. Yeah. When you set it before and try to shoehorn these fucking connections, it's like, ugh, just do new shit.
If you go to AVP Galaxy's fantastic archives, you can find pre-production art for Aliens Colonial Marines when it was set on other planets. It was a sandbox game. There's amazing.
I forgot it was a sandbox game. Yeah.
There's images of
fucking waste.
Future cities that are super run down and have a Colonial Marine presence in them. And it was new. It was brand new ideas. It looked more in keeping, and it expanded the world.
Yeah.
Now go back to where we've already been, show us what we've already seen, and get every detail wrong.
Get everything wrong. But a lot of the art you're talking about came from the other game that was pitched, because there was a sandbox idea that was separate from what this ended up being. They were both the Colonial Marines game, but they were very different from each other. And what I think you see, as soon as they went down the FPS route, which made a lot of sense commercially at the time, it became this reductive thing of like, give people the easiest, just get them into a place where they can shoot other people and other creatures as quickly as possible. And that's why you have the derelict with a fucking research station right outside of it. Like, just these, it just feels like it's just ludicrous, right? It's things that we've seen before but done worse, like you're saying. I know we're going to kind of come to a wrap here, and I want to hand it over to Jaime, because I know he's been kind of in listening mode a little bit tonight, just because he hasn't played the game, which I hope has not been too boring. But I think it's been a really good conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting to be in this position that I'm in, someone who's a crazy Alien fan, to hear about this project video game, this world that I have no knowledge of, essentially. So it's been really like watching the gameplay footage or the cutscenes, I suppose they are, and there's a little bit of gameplay footage in there as well, and hearing Michael Biehn as Hicks again is very, very interesting. So I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. So I hope everyone else has as well. So there's going to be plenty more. Thank you, Dave Gogol, for coming on the show. It's been way too long. Hopefully
yes,
you can come back again.
So this is the first time that I have talking about anything aliens on a podcast since I closed down mine. So this is it's definitely enjoyable to talk about it again, now that I'm not doing it all the time in the press release episodes. This was quite enjoyable. I have a horror podcast now, which really no one's listening to, but it's fun to record. It's Mouths of Madness Horrorcast. It's pretty much everywhere. Spotify, Podbean, Apple Music, I think. I don't know. We're still figuring it out. It's a good time. A huge horror nerd.
Website?
So, we don't have a website yet. We just
okay.
I do everything's we just have the Facebook page and the group, the podcast. That's it.
Can you say the name one more time?
Mouths of Madness Horrorcast.
Okay. Awesome.
You have to get the name through the Long Island accent is the problem. It's the
Hey.
Mouths of Madness podcast.
Yeah.
It's the Mouths of Madness podcast.
Because the
Get some coffee over here. Right?
Horrorcast.
Lovecraft in my
Horrorcast.
brain is
A
saying
horrorcast.
Mountains of
Yeah.
Madness. Mountains of Mouths.
Yeah, I like that. I like that it's a play off that. That's great.
Well, that's a reference to the film, I'm assuming, right, Dave?
In Mouth
Carpenter,
of
no?
Madness.
In the Mouth
Yes.
of
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite. I love
That's a
that
fucking
movie.
weird
That
That's
is
movie.
a very weird. movie.
That is
Good
a
one.
weird movie,
Yeah.
but a fun one.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
been really nice having you back on, man. Dave, as everybody
Yes.
knows, is a huge part of the history of Perfect Organism.
Yes,
for
yes.
many years,
Yes.
and is just one of our best friends and a great dude.
Which,
so-
by the way, Dave, there's an alien behind you.
There's always an alien behind you.
And
That might be the
Patrick, you too.
cat.
Yeah.
Patrick, you
It's
too.
gonna
There's
come
a
out,
bunch.
go into a
There's a
T-pose.
bunch behind Patrick, so just be careful.
It's been fun. I'm looking forward to doing more of these Hive episodes.
Yeah.
Me too.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
guys.
for listening.
Guys,
Yeah,
anytime you
thank
want
you.
me, just shoot me a text. I'm always looking to join because now I have no outlet to talk aliens on a podcast. So you ever need some insane New Yorker, you know where I'm at.
All right.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, guys. Thanks again for having me.